would we recommend the death penalty? I mean, it's a moot point. I'm just putting it out there because at the end of the day in the UK, we don't have the death penalty. And personally, I'm glad we don't have the death penalty. But recently we've had the case of Preston Davy, of course, and, that to me is perhaps one case where you would think, oh my God, they deserve the death penalty. But having said that, they are going to suffer more from languishing in jail, always looking over their shoulder, being terrified of being attacked, and ending up like Ian Huntley. Most child murderers or child abusers even, do suffer in prison. So sometimes you think maybe that's a better sentence for them, a life sentence, than the death penalty. But to me, when I think about the death penalty, it's all, in an abstract. You think, oh, yeah, it'd be good. They're out of the world. They're not breathing in air, these horrible people that have done horrible things. But when you think of the nuts and bolts of actually what happens, like years ago with Ruth Ellis, she would have been taken out of the room just the day before. She would have been measured up with those, and she was murdered. I was going to say she was hung by Pierpoint, Albert, who was a very famous executioner. It is barbaric, really, isn't it? To put a bag over someone's. We are better than that as a society, I think. Anyway, this is what we're going to do. Ruth Ellis, she did experience what we would now call domestic abuse, coercive control. Her partner that she shot, which obviously she should not have shot. Nobody saying she should not have received a sentence. What I'm saying is she should have received life sentence, not the death penalty, because she was a victim of coercive control, of domestic abuse thing, really, because it does show how we have changed. As I find this so intriguing, and this is that this woman, Ruth Ellis, the last woman to be hanged in Britain, has received a posthumous pardon, a conditional. They're describing it as a conditional posthumous pardon. That Ruth should not have been hanged. She should not have received the death penalty, because it seems that she was a victim herself of coercive control and domestic violence from her then partner. Well, he was like an on-off partner. I don't know if you've ever seen the film about there's been lots of films, documentaries, etc. And it seemed like Ruth Ellis, she was like a bit of a sort of a socialite, if you like, or she liked going out and, she was glamorous, as you could see from that other photo and this photo. And he was like sort of her partner, but he cheated on her. She seems like madly in love with him, and he treated her more or less with disdain and contempt. There was another man in her life, who did love her, but she loved this man. She loved him. She was almost obsessed with him, I think. Anyway, let me read you the story of Ruth Ellis. Where is it? Let's put the other windows down. Well, let's have a look at this article, actually, first of all. So what do you think about the death penalty? Because, of course, it's no good giving someone a pardon. I mean, she wouldn't have been alive now anyway, because this was 71 years ago. So it's not as if, she would be alive now, but she was so young when she was hanged. It's like her life was taken from her. And it was very contentious at the time. And, I think because of what happened with Ruth Ellis, that's part of the reason why the death penalty was abolished, because there was a lot of outcry about this. You know, a lot of outcry about the hanging of Ruth Ellis because of the situation, because of the circumstances around the murder. As I say, it was she never tried to plead not guilty in the sense everybody knew she'd murdered him, and she admitted that she'd murdered him. But the question was, did she deserve the death penalty or not? Well, let me know what you think when we've heard the story. So, let me read the article. Conditional pardon granted for Ruth Ellis, who was the last woman executed in the UK. And as I say, there's women like Myra Hindley, her and Brady, the Moors murderers, they were so lucky, really, because literally their case came to trial just after the death penalty had been abolished, because otherwise they would definitely have got the death penalty for what they did. And I don't think anybody would be trying to get a posthumous pardon for them if they would have been hung. So it's not because she's a woman. There's been quite a lot of women receive the death penalty. Maybe one day I'll do a video about that. But there were special case. The thing is, at the time, things like coercive control and domestic violence were not taken into account. And in fact, the judge in the case told the jury specifically they could not take into account, what twat he was, the guy that she murdered. And, you can't go around murdering people just because they are twonks, can you? You can't. God, everybody, there'd be murders, left, right, and centre, wouldn't there? So I'm not saying that Ruth Ellis should have murdered him. Of course, she shouldn't have murdered him. But should she have received the death penalty? Anyway, so Ruth Ellis, the last woman to be executed in the UK, has been granted a posthumous conditional pardon. She was hanged at London's Holloway prison in 1955 after being convicted of murdering her lover, David Blakely. Her family have campaigned for her murder conviction to be overturned, arguing she was a victim of domestic abuse and was physically and emotionally abused by Blakely before she shot him. Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy told MPs that the King had granted the pardon. So it's King Charles, Charlie boy, who's granted the pardon, saying that the death penalty had been replaced with a sentence of life imprisonment. So, it's, you may think, what's the point of it? Really, they're replacing the death penalty with a sentence of life imprisonment, but she was hung in 1955. But it is important because it's important for her family. And also, I think it is important because it makes a statement about how society has changed, how coercive control and domestic violence is now accepted as a bad thing. In those days, you just put up and shut up. There was nowhere to go if you were being abused domestically. Nowhere to go. It's difficult enough now. So, but then it was just like, forget it, So this is her granddaughter, Laura Enston, and she welcomed the news and said, the shadow of Ruth's execution has fallen across 2 generations. We have carried shame that was never ours to bear. Nightclub hostess and mother of 2 children, aged 3 and 10 years old. I didn't realise she had children, So to have a granddaughter, she must have had children. So she had two children, aged 3 and 10 years old, and they hung her. Ooh, dear me. I didn't realise she had children. I don't know. I just had it in my head, that she didn't. But of course, she must have done for a granddaughter to be carrying the torch for her now. So Ruth was from Rill, Denbighshire, and she shot Blakely outside the Magdala pub in Hampstead in London, following a tumultuous relationship involving infidelity on both sides. Ruth had an abortion, which was illegal in the UK at the time, and was physically abused by the racing driver, that's her partner, the one she shot, including being punched in the stomach during an argument that led to a miscarriage. Let's just put the picture up. I'm going to put the picture up of her with the guy that she shot, Blakely. So this is him. Tumultuous relationship. He's punched her in the stomach, made her have a miscarriage. Infidelity on both sides. You definitely still can't go around shooting people, can you? But and she did plan it because she took her gun with her. But yeah, I mean, what do you make of it? I mean, it's always been controversial. Always been controversial. I mean, for me, I don't agree with the death penalty, full stop. So just if you actually visualize what happened to this poor woman, them putting a thing over her head, hanging her like that. To me, it just makes society seem barbaric, so I don't think we're not supposed to be like murderers, are we? The whole point, we get outraged about murder and things like that. And then you go murder someone, but you don't call it murder because it's the state doing it. I don't know. The death penalty is still a very sensitive subject, isn't it, in the UK? There's lots of people think we should bring it back. I'm not one of them, but I respect people's opinions. I mean, especially in some cases, like with Preston Davy, the little baby, the case that we were covering, you can see why people get so angry, because it's just such a horrible case. But this particular case, I don't know. Life is full of difficult sort of conundrums, isn't it? So, where are we? The judge so this was quite bad. So the judge told the jury in her case to disregard the fact that the mother of two had been badly treated by her lover as a defence. That was the judge said that. Her case provoked a public outcry and occurred 2 years before legal changes saw that diminished responsibility was introduced as a defence. The story of her relationship with Blakely was turned into the 1985 film Dance with a Stranger, which starred Miranda Richardson and Rupert Everett. It's a good film. If you ever get a chance to see that film, it's probably on YouTube. It's definitely worth watching. On Wednesday in the House of Commons, Labour MP Pam Cox asked Slammy for the pardon on behalf of her grandchildren who were watching the proceedings from the public gallery. She said her case serves as a haunting reminder of a time when our justice system ignored the realities of domestic abuse and coercive control. In the decades since, members of Ruth's family and supporters have campaigned unwaveringly for her to receive a posthumous pardon. Will the Deputy Prime Minister agree with me that their courageous campaign and the terrible lessons of Ruth's case must strengthen the government's resolve to free women from devastating cycles of abuse? Now, I can honestly say I never thought, I've known about Ruth Ellis's case, and I've always thought it was a shame that she got hung, obviously. But I must admit, I never thought that this day would come. So this day has come because her family have fought for it. So it just shows you families can fight for things, They fought for this pardon, conditional pardon, that she should have had a life sentence, not the death penalty. And they've been successful, and it obviously means a lot to them. So while the pardon does not claim she was innocent of killing David Blakely, it replaces the death penalty with a sentence of life imprisonment to recognise a profound injustice in this exceptional case. The King has the power to grant pardons or commute sentences, which in practice is used only when the government requests it. He added, "We hope this brings a measure of peace to Ruth Ellis's family, who have carried the weight of what happened to her for over 70 years. Ruth Ellis's granddaughter, Laura Enston, said that although the impact of the sentence on her family could not be undone, she felt that justice had been done after 70 years. Ruth was a victim of sustained and brutal abuse. Her children, our mother and uncle, never recovered. Oh my God, I didn't know this. My uncle took his own life." So Ruth Ellis's son took his own life. Oh, do you know how actions have ripples, don't they? That, it was at the end of the day, Ruth Ellis shot that guy. She was the mother. She had 2 children. She must have known when she went to shoot him that, she was going to get the death penalty. Well, or life sentence, at least. She knew that, didn't she? So, and she still did it, even though she had 2 children. So you could think, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You could think, well, she shouldn't have done that to her own children. But was she of sound mind at the time? This is before the time that you could plead sort of temporary insanity or, whatever, all the different things you can plead nowadays for mental health reasons, that she'd been abused so much that she just sort of lost the plot, really. What do you think? So my uncle took his own life, she said. My mother's trauma left her unable to be the parent that we needed. Oh. The shadow of Ruth's execution has fallen across 2 generations. We have carried shame that was never ours to bear. We hope Ruth's story serves as a lasting reminder that the justice system must reckon with the abuse that drives women to the edge and must never be afraid to acknowledge when it has got things wrong. In interviews last year, calling her Ensign, said the impact of domestic abuse was poorly understood at the time of Ruth's conviction, and had the trial happened now, her grandmother would have been treated very differently by the justice system. Part of the issue had been Ellis's appearance, Ensign told AFP last year, because the glamorous single mother, you can bet that they were, in those days it would have been in the 50s, would have been frowned upon to be a single mother. Abortions were illegal. and she was a glamorous single mother. So, you know, people would have been really sort of sniffy about it. And apparently, also, she showed no emotion during her trial, and the jury took just 14 minutes to find her guilty. This is what her granddaughter says. You can let me know what you think about it, whether you agree or not. She inadvertently played up to that sort of cold-blooded killer persona that she'd been portrayed to be. But knowing what we know now about trauma and slow burn provocation, Ruth was traumatized and typical of domestic abuse victims. The abuse included an incident 10 days before the murder in April 1955, when Ruth suffered a miscarriage after Blakely, the baby's father, punched her in the stomach. So he wasn't a very nice man, was he? But he still didn't deserve to be shot, I suppose. So the Minister for Victims and Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls, Catherine Atkinson, said, "I want to thank her grandchildren for their determination in bringing this case forward and for making sure her story was finally heard." I mean, I think it's very important, this. You could sort of think, well, what's the point after all these years? But I think there is a big point in it. Katie, you makes you wonder, is it going to open up for similar cases? I mean, are there other cases of women who killed their partners and were hung for it? That now, because for something like this, to get a pardon like this, the family have to campaign for it. So it depends whether there's any family left in other cases that have got the appetite to campaign. So this granddaughter, she has, campaigned and lobbied and done all those things, and she's received success. Katie Colton, a partner at law firm Mission de Rea, who acted for Ruth's grandchildren, called the pardon a landmark moment. Today's decision does not only right a wrong done over 70 years ago, it sends a clear signal about the aspirations of our justice system. Violence against women and girls remains a national emergency. The government's public acknowledgement that the abuse Ruth Ellis endured should have impacted the outcome of her case reflects an important principle that survivors of domestic abuse today deserve in a justice system that properly understands and recognises the impact of that abuse. The death penalty was abolished as the punishment for murder in 1965, and the last executions took place in 1964 when 2 men were hanged for murder. And those men, they were hanged in 2 different places but at exactly the same time. We talked about that in a video before when we were discussing the death penalty because of Preston Davies' case. A lot of people think that those horrible adoptive parents of Preston who murdered him, not abused him, it's different from Ruth's case completely. There should be a death penalty for them. But personally, I really do think they will suffer more in prison. So, sometimes prison is a different kind of death penalty, isn't it? Okay, now I'm just going to put the picture of Ruth up again and ask you all, please, in the comments, let me know, what do you think? Do you think that Ruth's appearance went against her? I mean, there she is, single mother, glamorous. Do you think that went against her because she's got this sort of glamorous look? It's possible, isn't it? You know, in those days in 1955, single parents. I mean, it's almost a crime, wasn't it? And to be sort of going out and about and enjoying yourself. Yeah. Anyway, it's so don't forget she's not been pardoned completely. She's not been found innocent or anything like that. It's just what they're saying is she should not have received the death penalty. She should have had a life sentence, not the death penalty. That's basically what this pardon represents. And it's just acknowledging the domestic abuse that she suffered, and is that what pushed her to it? And I think, to me, when I've looked at the pictures of her with him, I feel that she absolutely adores him. Maybe she welcomed the death penalty because she couldn't live without him. She definitely put him above her children, I think, which is not a good thing, because she knew when she shot him, she would likely get the death penalty. She would certainly get life imprisonment, but she just did it. There's another part of me that thinks, well, she just didn't want him, had she found out he was with someone else, and, she didn't want him to be with anybody else. Maybe she welcomed the death penalty because it meant she could go and be with him in her mind. It's a very interesting case. So an old case, but an interesting case, and then relevant today, because of course laws are different today. Today, Ruth Ellis, if that happened today, Ruth Ellis would definitely. I mean, she would still have been found guilty of murder. She murdered him. There's no two ways about it. She went there with a gun. She waited for him to come out the club and she shot him. She meant to kill him. But there would be exonerating factors taken into account because of the domestic abuse, etc., that she'd suffered from.